All right, squad, we're here. We had some real important business to take care of. Just all things that are to make this show better for the people who are listening. So we're ready to go now. We're here to talk about the 2022 Spartan Race World Championships, the recap that came from it. First, let's talk about fantasy, the corral.
Don't gloss us over.
Let's spend a good half an hour on this if we could.
Minimum. There was a narrative in place that if Jack could just get to the postseason, it was over. He was going to wipe the floor with everyone because international, yada, yada. He's the guru. And darn it, if the plucky underdogs didn't come through and New York Giants, these 16-0 Patriots.
They're speechless, Bracken. Tail between their legs.
That was going to be my analogy. So you guys did it.
Wow.
I was speechless. Jack was just on a 10-second lag. That was
while plugged into the Ethernet cord.
Yeah.
Why don't we talk about how bad we smoked you guys?
Jack, do you have the scores there? It wasn't that bad. I mean, Jack put on all time. The Patriots losing at the undefeated season, it was a bit of a choke job. The Giants were good that season. They played them well at the end of the year, and it was a close game.
Yeah.
This was not a close game. Jack completely.
No.
What's a better analogy for someone that comes into favor and just like completely huge stinker, gets crushed?
I would say this is Seahawks Broncos Super Bowl when it was like 40 something to 8. Like you made the Super Bowl, but did you belong there? Is that what the final showed? So yeah,
I like that.
It was a bad showing.
Was it 49ers Chargers like way back in the day, like Jerry Rice days? Like that was similar to that. That was you didn't do well, Jack. I think you scored probably the worst. We don't have this on record, but I'm just going to say you scored worse than anyone ever has of all time.
There was a really bad one in Slow and a really bad one in Mexico. I don't know who had which, but I know that they have a bad score. You know what? I think I'll look up the old scores just so we can just kind of have public record of it for next year, and we can kind of keep track of like who sucked the most throughout the years.
We can start a record book. Best lowest score, highest score. Yeah. But this was close. The corral pulls it out to 10-8. I finished 9-9.
Wow. Yeah.
Jack 8-10. He had the lead going into the last two and went 0-4 in the last two matches. Jack.
Oh my goodness.
What I can't figure out is with so many foreign to the U.S. names in the top 10 of both fields, how you ended up doing so poorly. It was like 75% of the names in the top 10 weren't from the U.S.
Yeah, I completely switched my game plan and took way too many U.S. athletes instead of international. That was my demise right there.
Here are the teams.
Esther pick.
Sure and to be honest, so let's just look back at Lindsay number 1 screwed up everything.
Yeah, good pick. You thought you were going to get it, but yeah, this is. I'm pulling up the teams because I know the corral has no idea who is on their team at this point.
Well, of course we do.
I'm going to pull it down and I'm going to ask you to name 5.
It came down to Esther, Jeremy versus any of the other second 2 picks.
The Jeremy Gachet finishing 3rd. You mentioned it on the podcast. Yeah, that's the real thing that we should talk about here. Richard Heineck was on our list to draft, and then he said, "Oh, I told everybody 2 weeks ago that I wasn't going to show up, and instead of me drafting Sergei Preligan, the 2022 world champion, I had a DNS overall." So
I think Jack kept him on there. Held out on us.
He definitely knew. You think he definitely
for sure?
No, Rich is the only one who lies, and it's always about Annie's status. But I have never inaccurately given someone's status throughout the entire year.
Now, you guys can. Now, that is a big kick to the proverbial nutsack, not having Richard Heineck race. But when we chose Sergey,
he was 9.
You guys both said, "Oh, he didn't look good at trifecta," and I said, "I saw what I needed to see at trifecta." Kirk and I chose him confidently, and you both second guessed him. So I'm not even convinced you would have taken Sergey, Rich.
I definitely would have because I had a female first. I don't have to explain myself, but I was going to go guy.
Every loser has to explain themselves.
All right. Well, I was going to go guy, and Richard Heineck was that guy. And it would have been Sergey was the next logical one. After Sergey, the next man off the board was Jeremy.
Which again was considered a reach.
I wouldn't have taken. I may have taken him there if he was instead of.
You would have taken Ryland.
I would always take an Ryland. Yeah, I have no problem with the Ryland pick.
Okay, gotcha.
No, I'm taking Ryland no matter what. I just wouldn't have taken the guy who didn't show up.
In like the second half, there are a couple racers that Mark Gaudet said that he was kind of questioning if they stayed on course last year. What he saw in Abu Dhabi. So there were a couple names where I was like, I don't know if their place was actually as good as it turned out to be. So I kind of let him go. And
well, those are people you should take if they're going to be out there cheating and getting better places for our fantasy team. You don't get like integrity points in fantasy Spartan, Jack. No.
So do we have final scores somewhere we can toss around?
We had 33
it was something,
or 34, and Rich had 37.
It was 34 to 37.
That close, huh?
Super close. Because
you guys, though, I felt like we got drawn bad hands with athletes DNFing or not racing throughout the season. Yep. And finally, rent came due for you guys in the worst possible timing. And we already paid our dues early this year, and it finally came around.
You're only accounting for your own mishaps. This happens to everybody all the time.
No,
you're worried about like Mexico.
Victims.
Like
we started out hot
20 weeks ago,
and then the injury bug started. The boo birds were out, and then we showed that we are who we said we were. We finished strong.
The universe going back to equilibrium, folks, and here we are, homeostasis on top, right where we should be.
Yeah.
So
we have the longest time per pick.
Casey Monroe is the reason. Casey Monroe is the reason one.
This is the wheel of names decided this season. As I got the first pick, then you were first on waivers, and all of a sudden you get a 7th place finish for nothing.
Well, maybe, but if we had the first pick, we would have had Lindsay and still had Sergey and Rogloski and Gachet because we know how to draft.
No, you don't just get the first pick and the rest of your team if you switch.
All I want to know is
what
what
pick
do we
Jeremy
get?
As high as we did. No one was going to pick Sergey as high as we did.
Well, who else would you have expected us to take Gregor and Pavel over?
Well,
Jeremy
we would have
Gachet
taken Sergey ahead of Richard, and you guys clearly had different aims.
No way.
Yeah.
I don't believe it.
My thought passing over Sergey in round 3 was that Annie came the year before, just like Sergey. And the men's field was a little bit more unpredictable, in my opinion, in terms of depth of talent. So I figured Annie, considering she seemed healthy heading into this point, she was the safer bet to finish second. I thought Sergey was going to get third. I thought VJ and Atkins were going to beat him, but that was my thought passing up him.
And
that doesn't change much for why we chose Sergey. But Sergey, Albin, and Atkins were separated big time from the field last year. And Sergey did it every time it was runnable. This year on a shorter, flatter course, I think it only highlighted his skill, and that's what we saw. He and Atkins separated again. So while I thought Heineck's performance was a fluke last year, he does better the longer it goes. Sergey, the moment the sand gets flatter, has an ability to run on sand that no one else has shown.
He was pretty impressive there. But yeah, you guys went 1, 2, 3 on the men's side, which is hard. Then I went 4, 5, 6. Jack, who I don't even know where his first.
I had Pavel Herdina, so he was 7.
I mean, the VJ pick put you on.
Surprising. He had gone almost 50 straight races under an hour 15 where he didn't finish out of the top 2. I feel like we can call that a shock.
Oh, totally. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if I'm taking anyone different in that spot. I picked him to win in the prediction contest, which would I finish 6th in that? So I'm no slouch in predicting.
What I actually did a few like mock drafts that morning where I was like, all right, where do I think people are gonna draft people? And I kept being like, I think it would be smarter to pick 3rd so I can get those back to back there. But I decided 2nd because I was so confident that VJ was gonna win and Lindsay was obviously going to get taken away as the first pick, that I was like, that's probably the better spot to go right there. So I did it to myself.
There was no indication that VJ is not in the top 10. None.
Yeah,
I don't
look
think
good when I went when we went to Great Sand Dunes to run on sand a week before this. Like, I didn't see this coming.
Have you spoken with him?
I spoke with Sarah. I don't want to, while he's not feeling good about the race, I don't want to prod him about it. But I'm sure once he's back in town, we'll go on a run and talk about it. But I'll let him be the one who talks about it realistically.
The athletes who don't travel abroad and race abroad consistently, like you would say the Atkins and Webster clan, like they travel and race. Rylan has had a long history of racing high level, even if it's in mountain bike racing or something else, and traveling. Like, there's such a wild card when you go overseas. You're on a polar opposite time zone. The food is different. Your itinerary's off. The bacteria in the water happen to be different from what it was back home. Like, little stuff like that can really add up. And like we saw the contingency last year, the U.S., North America, aside from Atkins, went out there and laid eggs, especially on the women's side last year. Like the U.S. women went out there and shat the bed. And
we got 1-2 on the North American.
Well, some of
last year.
Yeah,
no, the men did.
The men were worse.
What people went there from the U.S. and underperformed, and it can be for a myriad of reasons. But it's a tough thing to travel, acclimate, get ready. Who knows? And like a lot of times, people just show up at 80% to the start line. Like that's how it goes. And I'm assuming that's the case with him. Is just something his body's equilibrium was off. He might have done everything right, but spend 12 hours at 30,000 feet in an airplane and then land in a different country in different time zones, and not making excuses for him. But sometimes you can be left scratching your head being like, I did everything right. Like somehow my body just wasn't ready to do what it needed to do today. Like there might not be an answer for the people who didn't show up and perform like we thought they would.
And I would imagine that racing on sand and just training on sand, you'll get a completely different idea of where your expectation should be. If you're by yourself running on sand, like not really knowing how you're comparing to others or not really getting any feedback of how to get better at that, where Sergey was clearly dialed in on how to run fast on sand. Right. And this is the first time VJ has really raced on sand. Right. So that's another thing too. Like we're going to now have good sand runners versus good mountain runners and everything like that. Jackie, what were you going to say?
VJ did do a race in Acapulco, Mexico, a couple of years ago. I think 2021. Remember, he went down there and like changed his shirt for the podium and had some controversy there. But he beat that guy, Eugenio Godinez Romero, who got second at the North American Elite Series race this year when everyone went down to Mexico. So he has run against a fast guy on sand before and got out to Great Sand Dunes a couple times. So yeah, it was surprising.
This is sand is kind of like mud in that there are many types of it and you don't realize it until you hit another type. Like if you run in the Midwest in the mud, or you find mud in the South or on the East Coast, it's all different. And the consistency is different. And the way your strider reacts to it is very, very different. And sand's the exact same way. And I didn't know it until I hit the next stage of sand. And so you can be a good sand runner and a bad sand runner, because there is some sand that is just finer and softer and gives way more. And I don't want to it became a joke on our watch party that, hey, did you know I raced over there? But I raced over there. It is different. And there were sections of that course where I was able to run with Sergey. And there were sections of the course where he put 2 minutes on me in a mile. And it was all sand, but it's different types of sand. And that's the kind of thing that he's seen it all. And because he spent so much time over there, he's lived there for a long time in spurts. And so he can get to the exact section that he wants to get to train for the exact section he's going to race on. Whereas if I went even along Lake Michigan, we have sand dunes, we have all this stuff, but it's just thicker packed. It is denser. We have constant water whipping off the lake onto it, and it does not run the same way. I could run there every day and not be prepared for Dubai sand.
How much did Sergey beat you by?
In the super, I think he beat me by 6 minutes. In the sprint, I think he beat me by a minute.
That puts you in fifth. You basically got fifth.
Well, it's hard to say. It's a different sand type.
Nope. I'm putting it in your profile as fifth place 2022. When
we talk about the
legacy rankings.
And I've talked about this, is I've never cracked the way I've cracked in that sand. Like it goes. It's worse than altitude when it goes, because you can't jog it. You lose ground on every step, no matter what pace you're running. And so you have to engage. It's like high rocks. When you start to crack, you can't cruise through the lunges. You still have to put out, and you have to put out to get through the sand. And so, like in the beast that I ran against him over there, I was 70 seconds ahead, 70 minutes into the race. Like, I thought I was giving it to him. And then when it went, and then the cramping started, and I went from averaging like 8 minutes per mile with obstacles to like 13 in 3K. Like when it goes, it really. What'd you say?
Heat is well factored in.
And heat factors into it. And these aren't failable obstacles over there. So when you see some of these time gaps happen, it's because when your stride goes there, you can't drop 10 seconds per mile or 15. You drop minutes per mile right away.
The ironic thing about that is, like, or not necessarily ironic, but you look at everybody who finished well, or for the most part, and yet our Mr. Ryan Atkins doesn't fit the mold. The way he runs, the way he looks, it's proof that we like to think a certain stride type, like a Sergey Chernin and Byrne and Lindsey Webster with the power stumps, just cadence. And Ryan Atkins looked like he was still running on like concrete road. It's so perplexing. Like, is there the right way? I say lean forward, let gravity do the work, right? The more you push off the sand, the more you sink into it. It's a very confusing thing to run on, but I still can't wrap my head around Atkins' sort of define physics watching him run comparatively. Yeah. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Like, Rich, I feel like with your quick turnover would suit you very well. I don't know if you agree with that. Whereas, like, VJ a little longer legged, he doesn't necessarily isn't an overstrider, but I would say he's not, he's certainly not a shuffler. So it's just interesting how one guy with a big open stride like Atkins can still go perform well. While on the other hand, somebody who I would say has a little bit of a longer stride, VJ, given his build, just perplexing to me. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And I can't imagine Atkins was doing a lot of sand running either, other than the week leading up. He didn't hint at it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it? What's that factor? What is it that causes some people to be good? Lindsey and Ryan never proclaimed to be sand running or training on terrain is specific until they got there, which was a week early. That's too late. So what is it? Grit? Intuition?
It's probably a little bit. That's what I was thinking when Bracken was like, when I was imagining myself, if I was to crack in a race that's all sand, how mentally demoralizing it would be to have to go that slow and have it still be really, really hard. So that it might be a little bit of that, where Sergey was just dialed in. You could tell he was just running faster. Where in any other terrain, you wouldn't think he'd be able to run away from Atkins in that fashion, right?
There's something to be said for your engine being adaptable. Some people's engines don't adapt. Like, their stride can put out in its pattern and not another pattern. And it seemed like the people who go over to sloppy terrain or sand or deep sand or whatever it is, the people who do well are the ones that lose the least amount of their regular running on the sloppy, terrible conditions. And Ryan's been that his whole career. Part of why I think Ryan Kent would have done well in these type of things, because he has that. Sergey generally has that. He does well on all different types of terrain. He's never really the best until apparently sand, but there's not a terrain he's out of place on. He's done well in stadiums. He's done well in Greece on technical stuff. He's done well on mountains in Europe. The people who their engine atrophies the least are the ones that seem to have done that. Ryland didn't have a bad race, and he's one of those people that his engine seems to carry over pretty well. Lindsay's the queen of that.
Yeah. I think it's
Pick
just
a terrain.
remarkable.
She's high level at it.
I just think it's remarkable what Atkins can do, because we've seen him run a championship at Killington, 5 at Tahoe, 2 in Abu Dhabi, and he's had one single time where he's ever finished more than 1 minute and 4 off of the win. Doesn't matter what the terrain is, if it's steep power hiking, on sand, runnable fire roads. This was actually the closest non-win that he's ever had. He was 12 seconds behind Sergey. But his average heading into this race was only 43 seconds behind in 6 other races in which he didn't win. The guy's just remarkable, and the cream always rises to the top, and that's why Ryan Atkins is arguably the GOAT again.
How do you argue the VJ thing then? If the cream always rises to the top, VJ's the cream, brother.
I know.
What do you say? What do you make of that? He's worked hard to have expectations on him.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Atkins have a couple of bad days ever, essentially. And that was at Greece Trifecta World Championship, where I think his best finish was like 8th or 9th in any of the 3 events a few years ago. I think he might have had he was dealing with like a back thing heading into that. And obviously he ended up winning the Ultra 24-hour championship shortly after that. So he was fine shortly after. But that's the only time I can really think of him having a bad day. We've seen VJ in Utah struggle with that race. That's just not his terrain. He won a beast earlier in the year at a national or an elite series. But then this was shocking in my opinion right here. I think he's 98% of the way there. But yeah, in terms of consistency, Atkins, you cannot argue with what he's done.
Yeah. And maybe that's just the thing. It's like, maybe Atkins is exceptional, where VJ is still learning his way, still young as an athlete, still figuring out how to be that consistent of a top performer.
Yeah. But VJ, next year, like I don't know if they're going back to Abu Dhabi, if they are, he's not getting 11th.
They are?
Okay. Are they? Yeah.
I'm going to go.
Bracken, you go.
I'm going to. I'm going to defend VJ, though, with simply the travel thing. So I raced over there twice, and both times I got to the start line not even wanting to race. And I got there closer. One time I got there 36 hours before the start. One time I got there like 30 hours before the start. Maybe 48 one year. 48 really one year, 36 1 year. Because I couldn't afford to get over there early and spend 5 days. And then in Ireland this year, I got over there 4 days before the race would have been. With the race I was supposed to do, the ultra race, and I couldn't do it. But I woke up to do a workout on race morning, or I intended to, and I was just going to go do a big effort, and I just scrapped the effort because I still hadn't fallen asleep. It was like 5:50 in the morning. I was still up, and Macaulay had gotten up to maybe do the workout with me. I'm like, I will not do this. It was going to be like a 6-hour mountain run. And he said, you know what's going to happen? If you would race today, you'd be cramping after like 3 hours because you haven't slept normally in 3 days. You haven't even fallen asleep yet. You are so depleted. All you can do is pump caffeine into you and you're going to cramp. And so with VJ getting there not super early before the race, and with him not having any, like he had said earlier, international travel, I think there's a good chance he got to the start line like, what am I doing here? I'm not prepared to do well. And maybe that's not what it is, but I think, Kirk, you were onto it earlier. A lot of people showed up there at 80% or 70% because you haven't slept and you picked up a bug on the airplane, or you had a bug starting and you're just getting over it. And now being in recycled air for 17 hours just did it to you. And now the travel is so hard if you're not good at it.
My take is don't even go if you can't show up at minimum 5, ideally a week early. I've done plenty of time zone international traveling. I've worked out or trained through those. And at some point, like you're spending $3,000 to go over to Abu Dhabi and race. Like I had a handful of athletes show up the day before. Like they're on a different, like, what are you doing? Like you're shooting yourself in the foot before you even start, and you're gonna have no idea where you really stack up. And I understand people aren't rich and you can't be afforded the luxury with time off of work. So like I understand the reason to go late, but if you truly care about your performance, you're not just going there for an experience. Don't even go.
John and Jared.
That's that I was thinking buddies. Of.
They showed up Friday night and raced Saturday morning.
Don't even go. You need, I'm going to say a week. You need a week to actually acclimate, get back on schedule. And I think a lot of people just run into that. And you have somebody like, what is Sergey's time zone difference where he lives to where he raced?
30-minute drive to the venue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Kirk, the first time I raced there, I landed and I had this plan. I was going to go to the hotel. It was going to be midnight by the time I got there. That's okay, because I slept on the plane, and then I was going to do a stairwell workout. I was going to shower, eat, and then try to fall asleep by 3:30 in the morning and start adapting. That was going to be my plan. And at 5:30 in the morning, I turned the TV on because I still hadn't fallen asleep. Now, if I was racing the next morning, I'm already screwed. And then the next night, I broke a fever like I probably only had 2 or 3 times in my life, and I didn't even think I was sick. It was just 17 hours of air travel, and suddenly I'm in a different place and I haven't slept, and I just shook and then sweated all night. Now, if I got there 2 days before the race, which I did, that was my night before the race. I broke a fever for like 6 hours the night before. So there's a real chance a lot of people ran into that. It's just a bad setup. You almost have to do an early year trip to mimic what's going to happen.
Have either of you guys done that big international travel and then paid attention to how your body, just, even if you're just like going for your normal training run, have you guys paid attention to that?
I went to Paris 2019. That's the only time I've left North America. And almost exactly like you were saying, Bracken, it's like I'm going to do a stairwell workout. And I remember doing that thing at like 2 a.m. Just because my whole sleep schedule was messed up. By the time,
and that's only 6 hours difference or something, 7 hours,
yeah,
right? Compared to like what this is.
It was a nonstop 9.5-hour flight from Denver to Paris, and then where we stayed, like by the time that I got to bed, essentially it was about 36 hours of sleep, and then it was rough. It took like 3-4 days. I didn't get jet lag too bad on the way back, but like while I was there, definitely affected things. I could tell my body was all messed up. The weird thing about this race is it's at like 4 p.m., 4:30 p.m. for the race. So I wonder if that plays as big of a role. Because for East Coasters, that might be, what would that be, 7 a.m. equivalent to them? And we're kind of used to doing that. Like, I know obviously sitting in one place on a plane does mess you up, but that is a normal time for a lot of people to work out at. So
that's
it might have minimized things a little bit.
So think about if the 4 of us decide to go over there next year.
We should.
You know that you have to nail your sleep, or at least get some. So what do? Do you try to get there really, really early and get on schedule? What if you can't? Then you have to roll the dice. Do I just try to do everything right? I'm going to do blue light filters. I'm going to put inner ear a light so that I can start changing my circadian rhythm. I'm going to do all the diet things you're supposed to do for going west-east. Or do I just like take half a Xan and hope that I can compete the next day coming off of a sleep aid? Like if you're going to do that, then you have to go and practice taking narcotics earlier in the season and doing quality workouts to see how do I respond 24 and 48 hours after having a sleep aid? And do I want to race on that? And can I race if I'm tested for that? Like you have to make gambles if you don't have a background in trying these things over and over and over. And who has dialed in their international travel other than people who travel all the time?
Is half a Xan your secret there? You know, Lindsay Webster was very open about saying, I get nervous before races and I go buy Z-Quil and I take it the night before races, for example, which I find nothing wrong with, honestly, if that's going to keep you in rhythm. You get there 5 days early, you drug yourself to sleep, you get on rhythm. I bet you there is some Z-Quil in Lindsay Webster's diet those first couple of days there, right?
Yeah, but you had to have practiced it. Right? Because what if you can't tempo off taking NyQuil the night before? What if you are just sluggish? So now you've got to train. Now you've got to acclimate yourself to taking a depressant the night before a big workout. That's a whole thing.
You know who impresses me? Not that we're honing in on all this now. This like I didn't think we were going to go down this route, but I don't know if you guys paid attention to Rylan Shadig's lead up. Like one of his Instagram stories was like the dude slept next to a building in a park with a sleeping bag and was like, I didn't get kicked out of here today. Like scrounging $3 for buying some dates and bananas somewhere. Like dude was living like a homeless guy.
He did that in Mexico.
Unbelievable, that guy. Unbelievable. I heard
just
he had
living life.
Bathroom issues out on course though, which might have slowed him down, is what I had heard. But nonetheless, impressive.
Yeah, what do you do in that situation for hydration, Bracken? You'd know better because of how much international racing you've done. I know that they generally say don't drink the water unless it's bottled. It's not bottled out there. You're taking it out of whatever hydration station it is. And if you're in the middle of the desert an hour and a half in and you're dehydrated, any water is looking pretty good at that point, whether or not it's what you're used to.
Yeah, and that was a concern. But the 3 races I did there, they had single serving foil topped water containers, like the old fruit punch you used to get in the cafeteria. So you had to take it, peel the foil and drink it. So that was a little bit more, well, it was way less convenient. You know, try doing that at race pace, trying to get those things open because you don't want to just litter in the desert. So you got to slow up and do it. But it's also a little bit safer. But the issue is carrying the water. I don't want to carry a hydration pack, but if Now in the super, it doesn't matter as much, but in the beast, you have to carry a significant amount of water because you're just respirating all of your water out of your system.
So these demands are certainly less than ideal, especially for North American athletes going over. And that's what's interesting about having it in a place like this. Outside of Sergey, most people had to travel here, right? So I mean, it was just like not ideal.
Annalisa Petrova,
right? Who and they're partners, I believe. So, but outside of that, like everyone else is kind of in the same boat. It would suck. It'd be definitely a big challenge for that. But was there any like real takeaways that you guys had on the men's side after watching it? Like, was it exciting for you guys? Was it like you said, Rylan was pretty impressive. We talked about BJ a little bit.
I don't think Rylan was impressive
in terms of the lead up. Yeah,
compared to everyone around him, he performed. I would say most people underperformed in this race. I'd say he performed.
I think just looking at the production as a whole, watching the men's race, you know, we could waffle. I wasn't on the live broadcast. I don't know what you guys discussed. I haven't watched it. Sorry about that.
Jeez.
I don't listen to anything Rich is on if I'm not joining him anymore.
Good.
Mm-hmm. But I wanted more to watch. Like I was like, oh, I do wish this was a beast. I don't know why. Like the super is more exciting, and that battle up front was great. And I think the super is the right distance. But I was watching it and I was like, I don't know why it felt a little anticlimactic. Like I wanted a little more. I wanted more of a story. I wanted the storyline to be drawn out more. And that's just my own. Like I don't know why I was feeling that way, but I felt that way. And then I saw the time gaps, and I'm like, Jesus, like we're either like this ran like a mountain race and I didn't understand what the sand would do, because the time gaps were astounding. Time gaps between first and 10th were like, what, 11 minutes? Jack, do you remember what somebody off?
Something like that. I have it up. It's 11 minutes.
On the men's side, that's on
10, like 11:30.
Unheard of in an hour-long race. And then you try to make sense of how dominant Sergey and Atkins were on top of it, making everybody else look slow, we will call it, in such a short, in quotes, race. And I'm left feeling like a little hollow, and I don't know why, because it was an epic race up front, but we just didn't see anything behind it. And I still like maybe selfishly wanted more content to consume on the assault bike, and it was over in my perspective as it started. And so it was like, I don't know why I feel that way.
You watched the regular footage and not our footage? And
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Cruel.
Yeah, I am going to watch ours.
We're the most anticipated live stream of the month, easily.
The month?
I'm going to second that, though. I've advocated for it should be around an hour to 75 minutes for a championship, but from the palatability of the viewership, more's better.
Would it have been worse though? Like how big of that? It's a 10-minute gap between
on
first
that
and 10th.
day. It would have been worse.
It would have been terrible. It would have just been like, okay, like
that's true.
Sergey runs past that. Sergey probably won by more. There would have been less room for Atkins to bring him back on those obstacles. I couldn't believe how much ground he made up on a Z-wall, like 10 seconds or something. Crazy.
No, on that day, yes. But
you gonna zoom in on what Z-wall looked like?
More counter surges and more counter punches. The way the year before we saw in the men's and women's, how it played out all the way through to the end. If you can guarantee that, more is more from a TV standpoint, from a being there or from the excitability of what we normally get in the race. Right around an hour, I still think is the best challenge. But Kirk, you're right. It ended too quickly. And
Can I say something dickish as well? Not that I need permission, but I think this race proved you don't have to be very good at obstacles to win an obstacle course race. And I don't mean to be a dick when I say that, but Sergey was notably slower on legit everything. I mean, like notably slower. Spartan Race is a running race with a few speed bumps along the way. We all know this, but like it was more apparent than ever because Sergey was on slow motion on most everything compared to Atkins, and yet he still won the race. His running did the talking. Spartan Race, running does the talking. It was just more confirmed than ever watching this. Like it was like, oh, this is where Atkins breaks him. This is where Atkins breaks him. Maybe that's what kept Atkins in the race. So you could argue the opposite, right? But like, the running still did the talking, and it's just like more confirmatory that like the CrossFit dudes like to bitch about Spartan being a runner's race. You're right. It's a runner's race.
What about that big funny carry that they had? What was that called?
The Bedouin carry.
The Bedouin carry, Kirk. I mean, you want more carries. Here's a Bedouin. Go ahead and take it.
Was that a big ceramic vase? What was that?
Oh, yeah.
Sergey's best obstacle is the bucket carry.
Do you guys agree with me, though? Obstacles don't really even matter. If it's a dry course,
As long as you make them through them, yeah.
That's
because
been the case for.
They were also, though, at the same time, it's the reason Atkins was up with Sergey.
I know, right?
Because he went from I wish we had stats on the Herc hoist, but he had to have been somewhere between 7th and 9th coming into the hoist, and he left with Sergey in 2nd.
Yeah,
he took advantage of the resets throughout the course, and Sergey survived the resets and kept getting back to running. I think it's the only race you can be either or and be just fine.
Yeah, that'd be fun if they had mats on either side of the obstacles like they have in like DECA, just so you could see.
Yeah. Kirk, you were mentioning you wish that you saw more punches thrown. I think that that's a direct effect because of people's unwillingness to travel there. Like, what would happen if Gregory Basilico was there? We saw what he did all day. That would have shaken up who we picked in the draft. John Albin, first time he hasn't raced the Spartan World Championships since
KBB.
13.
Yeah, don't forget about KBB.
Yep. Albert Soleil, Nikolai Dam got 5th last year here. You know, he's fast. If VJ had a good race, Ryan Kempson, probably I could have seen him doing pretty well. He's sticking his nose in there. Lars, just people, it would have just been so much deeper if people were willing to travel for this. And I think that that's kind of the reason why we didn't see the 5 deep battles that we did. On the women's side, we definitely saw a pack of 4 for a good chunk of it. And I know we're talking about the men right now, so we can dive into them after. But I think that simply the amount of people who showed up is the big reason why you didn't have those close battles that you were looking for.
Do you think time gaps were purely related to the lack of depth of field versus the demands of the course?
I think you missed so 1 and 2 broke away last year. They also finished 1 and 2. John Albin was not here. He finished 3rd last year. He can run on the sand. 4th place, Gregory Basilico. He can run on the sand. Richard Heineck beat everybody in this field at some point. He's raced in the Middle East like 10 times. You know, he would have done well in the sand. So I feel like that's your reason why you just didn't have the close battles.
But also you have someone like Rylan and VJ who, you know, you look at this from North American Championships where Rylan like starts the whole field and he's 7 minutes back now. I think I don't know. It's hard to say that just adding new people would add depth. I mean, obviously you could come to that conclusion, but it seems like this course just kind of really killed people.
You know?
Yeah.
It does, but I think that the depth of field allows for people to blow up. When you look at Tahoe, every year someone had a bad race. 1 year Woods had a bad race. The other 2 years he was leading the field up the first climb. We had years where everyone had off years, but there were so many, every monster was there that it covered up those gaps. Over here, we have 2 or 3 people have off races, and now there's minutes of gap because there's no like appropriate levels of fluff in the field. Not fluff, but filler. The filler wasn't there. You were in it or you were out of it. And like that, of those 5 people Jack mentioned, it only takes 2 of them having a good day to suddenly look like we've got a lead pack.
Yeah. And those were only mentioning like Europeans for the most part. Imagine if Mark Batras, who crushed it in Laughlin in the sand, Mark Gaudet, you know, he's been out there. He's as fast as anybody. He can run on the sand. So yeah, we could have easily had a few of them pop a good race and make it more interesting.
I cut you off, Kirk.
No, I was trying to jump in too. What's tough about being like a United States citizen and us being so like egocentric with our racing, every single time we we get the most media attention. The international athletes watch a Rylan Shadig win an Elite Series race and VJ Jones win a couple, and the best of the best are over here. We've historically gone over and not risen to the occasion and left the door wide open with the question mark, like, are the best racers really here in the United States? Because we historically, anytime we go and see depth of international field, we go and underperform every single time. We can't back up our own egos. And we're part of the problem. We talk about it. We're more in the know with our own US and North American athletes, but like generally very underwhelming.
Well, we won the team. We won the team race, side. So USA dominates.
But don't you agree? Like they have to be like, I mean, international athletes have to feel quite proud, and also like maybe it just softens our contingency a little bit. You see it at OCRWC when it's overseas. If they keep it in Canada or US, we do just fine. You throw anything, anyways, but then when they have it over here, we don't have the international contingency as much, and so like when you submerge the US athletes with the international contingency, I can't think of a single race in which we went over there and really like from start to finish represented as to, I don't know. how good we think we are.
Kirk, this is the perfect transition. I'm just going to share my screen real quick. Here's a breakdown of the men's every year at Spartan World Championship. And how many you have? One. You had none in 20. Before that, you never had fewer than 6 at any single year at a Spartan Race World Championship.
Can you say that again, Jack, from the top?
Suddenly, you
Because
have
the screen share must have settled the soil even further once you pressed.
We don't know what stat
settled
you're
the
sharing.
soil. All right,
Start from the
can you see it
beginning.
now.
We can see it, but we couldn't hear
Okay.
your explanation of what we're seeing.
2022, right here. I've got this one highlighted. You have one U.S. athlete who finished in the top 10, which was Rylan this year. If we look at the year before, you had none. No one finished in the top 10. I think like Mark Gaudet was 14th or something. He was the top finisher. If we look at the U.S. prior to that, when it was always held on U.S. soil, you always had at least 6 men in the top 10 represented from the U.S. So there's just a changing of the guard when you head overseas. It doesn't mean that either country is better or worse. I think that Europe kind of got screwed in the past, and those 6, 7, 8 members of the U.S. in the top 10 through the years while it was hosted at Tahoe or Killington might have been a little inflated because you didn't get everybody going over there. Just like not everybody from the U.S. is heading over to the Middle East, but the numbers clearly show it's not looking good for U.S. and Canadian athletes other than Ryan Atkins when you head east over the
This
Atlantic.
is the issue, is that overseas is not even the same sport when it's on sand as it is when it's in the U.S. The non-U.S. Spartan World Championships have never hosted a normal course. And Tahoe isn't necessarily normal because of altitude.
Mm-hmm.
So they've always been punished coming over if you didn't live at altitude, and everyone gets punished going over to the sand unless you have sand access. It's just a weird style of test. Killington was probably the most neutral because it was the closest coast to overseas, and it was the type of mountain that anyone can find other than the Flatlanders. Like it's a very European mountain, or at least a wet European mountain. So finding it almost seems like to find out who the best is, you have to have the same style of course in both directions. We've never once had that. So it's undeniable that the U.S. falters at overseas championships, but we've never run the same style of course. And so I don't think that when we put 8 in the top 10 over here, we learn anything about ourselves. And I don't think when we put 1 in the top 10 over there, they learn anything about themselves. I think everyone's still waiting for that. Where's our good test of what we can do?
Right. I think the same thing. And like ultimately, we need a little bit more support for the athletes, which is always going to be the problem, like trying to get people to get everybody in one spot. Right. I think that's really going to be the hang up. But also like with it being in international these past 2 years, like ultimately, I think this is kind of good for the sport, right? Like putting these people on our radar, like making us pay attention to these international athletes, like the Richard Heinecks, the Basilicos, the Sergei Preligins, where they would probably not make it over here, especially at a race like Tahoe, where it's not favorable to them. So it does actually expand the sport in terms of a spectatorship more worldwide. So I think it's good.
I ran a race in New Zealand one time, an OCR event down there, and I left thinking they should host Worlds every year because it's inconvenient for everyone to travel to, and it was a mix of every terrain. You had mountains, you had slop, you had forest, you had a hard pack. It was just everything and everyone might want, nothing of all one, and everyone would hate traveling there.
What was the Golden Trail they had at the Azores?
Yeah.
Have something like that.
Go do that. But and we can't do that obviously because unless it was just like a Ironman Kona where there's such prestige that people will travel, you're not going to get 10,000 people through a New Zealand course. Can't do it, especially with travel the way it is right now. You're not going to get 10,000 people to show up there if that's what you need to put on the event. But I wish there was some way of putting on a terrain neutral race. Like show up to Greenland or Iceland or someplace that's neutral territory and neutral terrain and do it in neutral weather and find out who are the best of the best.
Now I don't know
so
if
you're
I'm
saying
going,
like
go ahead, Jack.
On average 6 hours of travel time for the average athlete and pick terrain that might be on multiple continents. That's kind of how you're framing where the best location would be.
Or maybe the best thing would be like, if this was a real professional sport and there was funding, we all go run the European series and they all come do the North American series. Like more data points. These one-off races don't tell people anything.
Right.
If you do well, it tells you did well. And if you do crappy, it's like, did it even tell me any? Like, does VJ come out here thinking I'm the 11th best in the world? No. Does Sergey leave and everyone's like, he's undisputably the best in the world? No. But on that course, on that day, no one could touch the man.
That's also what we like about
learn stuff.
It's also what we like about OCR, though, isn't it? Isn't that what brought us here in the first place? Is the fact that the discrepancy in courses and the unknown and anybody has a chance sort of mentality was the allure. That's what sort of aggravated some of us about standardization recently, at least me personally. Do I think Abu Dhabi in that terrain's a good choice? No, but you could argue the other side of that coin very easily.
Yeah.
What drew us here in the first place.
More data points then.
I agree with more data points.
But that's also why we have the 10 world championships.
It's a good point.
You know, because it's like, oh, well, we got to get this all under.
Yeah.
So I don't care that it's not in the US. I just want us to get over there more then.
I just
think
if
we all went to European championships and trifecta and Abu Dhabi, I think then we know everything we need to know.
I just think seeing the US contingency and some really good athletes show up to these internationally traveled races and underperform in general really cements like the legacy of some athletes like the Zuzana Kosamovas who come over to the United States and crush every time she shows up. The Lindsay Webster and Ryan Atkins clan, what John Albin has done, putting his body and time zone shifts through absolute hell and sometimes en route to these national championships. It just goes to like even cements further that like the best in our sport, like no matter all these excuses we want to make for everybody, like they're exceptions. Like they don't need the excuses because time and time again, they've shown up and performed. And there's that hand select few who now like moving forward, if we have these prediction contests in the future, heavily going to change how I approach looking at things because some have proven we have enough data points on some select athletes to say, who cares where or when or what or how, there's going to be some people who are going to perform well. And I just cements like the legacy of a handful of people in my mind, knowing how hard this can be to do for most athletes.
Do you guys know the track comparison, like how athletes perform in the Diamond Series or the Diamond League for track when they go around? Is it the same characters winning no matter where they're going around? Because that's kind of the closest comparison I can think of.
And that's something that I have tried to find information on and cannot, which is pro track athletes travel protocol, because they set world records anywhere they go. They set national records anywhere they go. And I haven't been able all last year when Abu Dhabi was happening. I was trying to find every piece of information I could to help athletes that I was training. I couldn't find the best practice. When I was preparing to go over to Ireland for that race, I was trying to find, do these people take sleep aids? Is it over the counter or is it prescription only? I couldn't find these things. We almost have to just one-on-one talk to these people and find out, like maybe get a hold of an agent or a coach and like, how does this happen?
But the biggest thing you see on social media, which has made everybody accessible now, is that as soon as one Diamond League race is done, they're just traveling to the next environment and they're always spending a week plus there before their next race. So it may not be ideal, but you can tell because
they get there early.
They get there early. That's like the one thing they all have in common. As soon as their one race is done, they're to the next environment. It's probably their saving grace.
But it's also very specialized. Right. The OCR is so generalized, like where people have strengths, like you line up for the 400 meters, no matter what, no matter where you are. I think that the factors of like sleep and travel would be much less.
I think it's more.
Because it's such a pointy end of the spear
that hundredths matter. If you're at 80%, like you're screwed. Ryan was able to obstacle himself back into the race. You don't get a reset in the 400. You have to be on your, like you said, that you have to be on your pointy end at all times. Like
but you also don't have sand to deal with. Like it's still,
you don't deal with terrain style.
You don't like
you're not going to a cinder track. Yeah.
Right. It's not like, the tracks aren't different places. So like you can prepare as better than what we could prepare for an OCR.
The other
Do you wanna
issue is I don't know a single athlete who flew over first class or business class. And there's a big difference sitting upright and lay flat. And the Olympians and the world champions, they have a lot more money for travel. And so that's one. Now, not everyone has it. Like, I doubt Eric Sawinski was flying over there first class, but I guarantee Eliud Kipchoge is in a lay flat mini apartment on his air flight rather than sitting up jammed between two people and unable to have more than like 3 inches of pitch to his seat.
I'm still not convinced Ryan Lynch-Haddock didn't paraglide over, but convince me otherwise.
He was probably in a wheel well somewhere.
Jack, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say we actually have someone that you could ask, sort of in the sport and the hybrid space. Anas, he is a track agent, so he'd be a good person to ask on.
It's Steph Garcia.
We should get her on. Yeah,
I'll be seeing Anas this weekend out in L.A. High Rocks.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. You know who we haven't mentioned because she wasn't there is Nicole Miracle. She's competed well internationally.
Yeah.
I don't know about how Emma's done internationally, but Nicole
last year. But
Nicole did great at OCR Worlds in the UK, didn't she?
Yeah, and trifecta world champion.
Yeah. So I think she's someone who's figured it out as well, and she's also in that Boulder house. She was with who was in that?
Andy Wacker.
Andy Wacker's in that house. He's always overseas. So maybe being surrounded by that pro level athlete, she has a bit of that advantage in how to travel.
Now, I thought when she went to Greece, she went there like a week or two early to do a bunch of bouldering. I seem to remember that. So that definitely helped.
So one key, would you do one thing right? Just go a week early, minimum. Right. You're going to have a 95% chance of performing to your capabilities.
Yeah. Rhea's always over there early, playing around in her home country and doing races before she does her race. Kirk, maybe that's just it. Forget everything else. You don't have to get everything right. Just get there early and figure it out along the way. Get your bad nights out of the way.
Yeah. And if you can't, just try not to worry about it. But it's probably going to affect you. So I don't know if this is exactly where I didn't plan on going this direction, but now that it seems like everything is kind of coming together, right? Like they want there to be actually a world champion for OCR, I believe is why all of these things are kind of converging. Right. So, and with that being the case,
explain that. I don't track.
With World Obstacle having their hands kind of in all the different places now, even with Spartan being connected to OCR, everything's a little bit connected. And I thought that was so that they could actually crown what would be considered a world champion, not just like the OCR world champion or the Spartan world champion. I thought that was part of it so that they could actually have one real piece.
I'm not buying it, but sure.
All right. Let's theoretically. We can do this in theory. Okay.
Sure.
So wouldn't you think that they could have an event that didn't necessarily need to make money then? Because you had mentioned, Bracken, we still need to have 10,000 people show up to bankroll this event. But if everything can kind of just come to the culmination and there's qualifiers, 20 people show up to an event that is actually in maybe somewhere neutral that could just be more beneficial. Is that a world we can see happening? I mean, you already said you don't buy it, but that would be
ideal. Buy that. Yeah. That's what Abu Dhabi was. They didn't have to put anyone through the course and they made money. Because they got a lot of money from Abu Dhabi to go there. So in that theory, that could absolutely happen.
I think that's what we would need to really be able to get the Basilicos and all the wherever we needed to end up, have it be just a championship event and maybe get a little bit of support to people to get over there. And less
you're more likely to get the Europeans to travel period though historically than US athletes. I think that you need how many times have you seen European athletes make 2-3 trips over? Leon, in Ida, they do it all the time, it seems. And John Alban,
Chris Woolley came over for freaking came from Australia for
Decafit
champs.
And he's coming over for a third time for a friend's wedding or bachelor party later this month. And so you see a lot of non-North American athletes willing to travel internationally more. So I feel like the not bribing, but the incentivizing financially side of it, it's going to be harder to convince the US athletes to do it.
The Europeans care more about the sport and the love of the game than the Americans do as a whole. It's not a blanket, not everyone, but as a whole, North American racers care about titles and prize money and notoriety, and the Europeans want to go do the thing that represent the sport the most. They will come over, and we're like, I'm going to lose money on that trip. I'm not going. It's just a different mindset. And I don't know what to attribute that to, but that seems to be the case.
I think a lot of people are here. Yeah, I think a lot of people in the US, it's hard to get vacation time from work, and it's just a lot more of a relaxed culture on that topic in Europe. So I think that's limiting people as well.
Would that limit the top end of our sport?
Not really.
I guess a lot of people like, I guess Rylan, he has a real job, but that's a very flexible one as a firefighter. He's not solely a pro athlete, but a good chunk of them are pro athletes. So I guess you're right there.
Who didn't go? Like, who did you want there from the US? Kempson sets his own hours. Botras sets his own hours.
I think he has a job.
Yeah.
Does he?
Mark got
He's got a job, yeah.
Mark got military. He would have had to leave last second.
And he just did World's Toughest, so we wouldn't have seen him.
Okay. Who else?
Yeah.
Who else did
Emma.
Spearman, job.
Emma would have had a firefighter. Yeah.
Kirk DeWint. What's his excuse? Get him over there.
I work like 5 hours a week. I got all the time in the world.
Right. Just you're chopping it up with us.
Yeah.
Lars, but he works at a civil engineering company. So he has a standard job.
Okay. Maybe there's more validity there than I thought.
Yeah. I think there's more opportunities to do other events here.
Right.
Like that's how I kind of justify it. It's like, I'm not going to go there, and instead I'm going to do this race because it's closer and I could probably make some money and get a similar experience.
Here's what I know. In Killington and in Tahoe and at OCR Worlds in Stratton or Blue Mountain, the moment one championship ended, people registered and planned their next season around the next one. And there are very few North American athletes who did that for Abu Dhabi. And I don't know if it's because of Abu Dhabi or because of not America, but that whole emphasis around my whole year is this one thing, that stopped happening when Tahoe left. Everyone knew we were going to be at Tahoe every year. There was no debate there. Like, even if you suck at that, I'm still going to go out there. It's spectacular. It's epic. Everyone goes. That everyone goes mentality left the North American contingent when the race left North America.
And I think that
the initial, Fire Festival level issue with Abu Dhabi, that didn't help people want to go there a second year.
Just Spartan in general. I think that just Spartan has fallen out of the athletes' good graces. Like, if this was something different, that where we felt like they had our backs, we were going to get paid, but every single year it gets worse and worse because of Spartan. And I guess we're going to see, we haven't had a great chance to talk about OCR World Championships, where they're moving it and how unfavorable that is to international athletes. So I guess we'll see how people will show up to a race that's in Mammoth Lakes, which isn't even favorable for people from the United States to make it there.
It's a hassle.
Yeah.
From California, it's hard to get to.
Does anyone know why that was chosen?
I was going to ask you.
Well, wasn't your answer always money?
Well, for Spartan, it's always been money.
Well,
but I don't know what OCR Worlds, what they do with sourcing venues.
What capacity does Spartan have to do with them now?
Nothing. They just they work not against each other now, it seems like. If you buy the Unbreakable Pass, it includes OCR Worlds as a race you can go to. Which I don't understand what OCR Worlds gets out of it, because Unbreakable is not sending a portion of their proceeds to OCR World. So I wonder if there's going to be more behind the scenes that we're not aware of right now.
There's got to be some cash injected into OCR World Championships, don't you think, from the Spartan end of things?
No. There's no way Spartan's putting cash out.
Really? Then what?
They weren't paying $500 podiums. You think they're going to inject life into a different company?
I mean, don't they do that all the time? Haven't they been just buying stuff up with acquiring things?
Handouts. I just think Joe would roll in his grave. He would dig a grave, get into it, and roll over before he would give someone money.
But wouldn't that mean maybe they made money from having their venue chosen at Mammoth Lakes? Maybe that was part of the deal. It's like, we'll get you a venue the way that we do venues, and then we need to get a kickback from that.
Maybe you know something I don't. I don't think they're
I'm just talking. I don't know anything. What is it that they have to do with each other then?
I pictured they had this like thing where Joe stood like this with his hand out and Adrian stood like this, and they both had their hand on their gun behind the back. Like, hey, we're working together, but if you move, I'm freaking shooting you in the face. I don't think they're working together yet. I think they stopped working at odds temporarily.
I see.
Please write in and correct us if we're wrong.
Yeah, if anybody knows anything, because we don't know nothing.
Well, didn't Mappy Davis do an interview that
and
would fill everybody in on that? Didn't he cover that? Don't we have answers if we?
He did something with Ian Adamson, I thought.
Oh,
yeah, but anything he posts as a link in our group chat, I refuse to watch because that's not the point of our group chat. Like, I don't want him hawking his wares to us. We don't do that. So I just, on principle, I didn't watch it.
I'm just going to send people Instagram. And when people ask me a question about like, how's DecaFam, I'm just going to send them an Instagram post. And that's how I'm going to talk to people from now on.
That's good.
Yeah. Jack, you got something?
Yeah. I just looked it up. Yeah, I just looked it up, and Stratton Resort is part of Icon Pass, just like Mammoth Mountain or Mammoth Resort. So I wonder if there's kind of like some internal thing brewing right there where they just want to keep it within the network, and because that's kind of one of those national or international level ski passes.
The answer could literally be as easy as that.
Yeah. Not a great way to pick a venue for a world championship event, but
no, it is. Bracken said he wants the place to be as inconvenient to get to for everybody. That's Bracken
true.
said. President Bracken says that's the rule he's going to implement. So there you go.
That will be the takeaway that people have from this episode.
And who's actually prepared for 8,000 feet? Even like living at 5,000, I guess it'd be more prepared, but starting at 8,000 feet, that's craziness. For a 3K?
Like all these championship races just give me like more and more reasons not to show up to them. Like every year I have more and more reasons to not keep doing what I used to do and just figure out what else I want to do next. And every single athlete of mine almost feels the exact same way. It's weird.
You know that meme that got real big during the pandemic of how it started, how it's going? OCR World started in Oregonia, Ohio, at this little podunk, awesome ravine-filled off-road park. And now it's in Mammoth Lakes at altitude. And Spartan started at Killington on the East Coast, this really visceral, nasty mountain race with tons of tricky obstacles and like 5 heavy carries. And now it's in Abu Dhabi in the sand with no like one tricky obstacle, and no one from the United States goes. It just, where we've ended up is very different from how things were incepted, which isn't always a bad thing. But the stark contrast right now is kind of hilarious to me. Like everyone's trying to throw Hail Marys the last few years, and they get increasingly improbable.
Yeah, I just looked it up on the rest of the list. Tahoe and Killington are both part of that Icon Pass, so we can trace it back a little bit more. So I have a feeling if you want to know a future location of, OCR Worlds or Tahoe, it's probably going to be one of those on the pass. This is just my theory.
Big ski and snowboard have to deal with this.
Kirk, is Welch Village part of that Icon Pass?
You know what? Probably.
Aspen Alps.
You never know. I'd love that.
Is that the Minnesota one that we ran at?
What if Alpine Valley's Icon Pass?
Probably epic. Probably epic pass. I'm picking up all ski terminology being out here in Colorado. I don't ski or snowboard, but I know these are things that people talk about a lot. A whole lot, Jack.
It's like both. It's like Spartan a little bit. Like you never know. Maybe that something new will excite me, or this 3K format for some reason I'm going to get excited about. But it's like Spartan's been like playing a game of like Jenga with themselves and constantly like pushing out the wrong puzzle piece, like constantly. And it's just like closer and closer to tipping over. Like every decision they make is like, that's not the move I would have made to keep this tower standing. That's not the move I would have made. And pretty soon
you've got this just one very obvious Dave Watson piece that just won't ever be touched. Like Watson, Adamson, untouchable pieces.
It just feels a little bit like that to me.
All-time QB. Do we talk about the women's race much? What else? What is there really to say about it? Like that Lindsay's just
because we don't know.
cemented it.
It was very good video coverage.
Totally.
But it was a lead vehicle. We didn't see any other battles because they were gapped so big. And having seen behind the scenes how production goes, I'm not going to say anything negative about it. It's just the fact is we saw the leader. And on the men's side, we were lucky that there were 2 leaders. And on the women's side, there was 1. And she just dumped Dom sauce all over everybody. And really, it looked like she tempoed the race.
She may have.
She looked great. I mean, that was probably as impressive as she's been. It seemed like didn't matter who was going to be. Even if Emma showed up, I don't think she had anything for Lindsay on this day. I know.
My guess
you were big
is
on
she
Emma.
could have run it Tough Mudder style. And I would have, my bet is if she just decided to keep going, it would have taken until lap 4 before she didn't win the race. Before she ran a time that's second place.
Oh, I
see. Yeah.
I mean, Esther was 2 minutes back, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think she
Elisa
could have
was
kept her
just
same
after.
effort for another lap. And then she would have had to dig deep for lap 3. I think it was 3 to 4 laps continuous before 1 lap didn't win.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
That's dumb.
I wouldn't bet against that.
The way Lindsay Webster crosses the finish line is one of the most frustrating things I've ever watched in my life. Because of the sheer fact of the ease in which it happens, the smiles, the full sentences spoken immediately after crossing. It's like, I don't understand how you can win, be that dominant and that relaxed while crossing the finish line. Her husband, Ryan Atkins, will put on a nice show for us sometimes crossing the finish line, flopping on the ground, hemming and hawing, which I like seeing from time to time too. But Lindsay just gets under my skin because I can't understand it. That's how good she is. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's like, I can't wrap my head around it.
She somehow knows all the ins and outs of what happened in the men's race by the time she finished too. Like someone's like telling us like, oh, I heard. Yeah, Ryan.
She had 1 or 2 tough races this year, and all the rest she crosses the line like in Abu Dhabi. Like it's like, all right, split. Coach, we taking 90 seconds or 2 minutes between this one? Like, that's how she looks. She looks like she's rep 2 of 3.
It's amazing. Well, relaxed is smooth and smooth is fast. And maybe she's a master of staying relaxed. And it's a trait that could be taught. I don't know, but it's impressive.
I think she's had the most impressive ascension in the sport. She didn't have a single definable skill that was better than anyone else when she entered. And almost every other champion we've ever had one. They had their thing and they rounded out the others. She was like pretty solid across the board in everything and scary at nothing. And now you look at her, and if you had to try to write down on paper her skill that's better than everyone else, like, I don't know. I don't think she's the fastest runner. She might be the best technical terrain descender.
Yeah.
She doesn't take time on people on ops. Oh my goodness, she just won by 17 minutes. Like she has just gotten everything just keeps rising and rising and rising until you can't even fathom her getting beat, and you don't even know how she got here.
This is her 4th world championship. Spartan.
It's 4th Spartan.
And Susanna has 2. So she has 2 more than the next.
Yep. Claude has 2.
Claude has 2.
Amelia. Yep. Nicole
Susanna should
and
just
Jenny
do
Tobin.
one more.
Just to close that gap a
She
little
hasn't
bit.
raced for like a year. And
I know. She could have 4. She just didn't do them.
Lindsay started beating her.
Yeah.
yeah.
Bracken, you say once in a while, like the more things change, the more things stay the same. Right? Didn't that something you say?
It sounds like something Bracken would say. I don't know if
It
I've heard him
does.
say it, but
I believe so.
believe
But
it.
it does feel a little bit like that. We always get these, like, especially Jack gets these glimmers of hope, and the new blood comes in with these great pedigrees. And there's nothing wrong. He's right. He's researched and studied, and it's like, this is the year in which the new blood, like, we're going to have the Fab Five again, but it might be 4 different people than we've seen previously, or the men's field comes in, and yes, there's glimpses of it. Don't get me wrong, but like at the end of the year, we have the same dumb conversation. Like literally, at the end of the year, it's like, yep, same people ended up proving themselves worthy yet again. It's just a little ironic, and I'm hopeful that will change, but it hasn't yet, really.
This week, I said on our other podcast, but I went to the Bucks versus Lakers game. So I got to watch LeBron James in person for the first time. And he went down with an ankle roll in the second half. And the guy I was with, we looked at each other. We're like, how weird is it to see him hurt? Because the NBA has been the same way, where someone keeps popping up. It's Paul George, or it's Russell Westbrook, or Durant, or Harden. Like, there's always the person this is going to be the person that takes over as the best in the NBA. But LeBron just never gave anyone the opportunity to build up steam, and they always had something shortchange them. Like, Nicole's ACL is a really unfortunate, unforeseen thing. But part of being the greatest of all time is something in your genetics, your DNA, the way you prepare, and your luck means that those things don't happen to you. Michael Jordan didn't have catastrophic injuries after year one? LeBron James never had catastrophic injuries.
Yeah. Lance
Armstrong, for as catastrophic as what he went through, once he was back, didn't have anything happen. Like, the greatest people really don't, like, how much Tom Brady had one season.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, he's kind of okay. Peyton Manning, one season. Outside of that, he's okay. Somehow the best don't have the nonsense happen to them as regularly as everyone else. And Lindsay has that. Like, Nicole should have surpassed her at some point. Susanna should have surpassed her. Emma should have surpassed her. But something always gets in the way. Sometimes it's her, sometimes it's them. It doesn't matter. But she's been untouched by all of this. When was Ryan really injured? I'm sure he and Lindsay have dealt with things, but they're there every single year and healthy enough at least to toe the line. That's just part of that undefinable greatness. And it's maybe the mark of true greatness is you look back a decade later and show me when you missed a chunk of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I had a conversation with her on Reinforced Running podcast. I was kind of like trying to dig at and be like, why are you awesome? Like, what is it about? What's about like your mindset? What do you got going? And she was kind of like, I've just been doing it a long time, just built up this huge base, and other people kind of stopped, and I just kind of kept going. And now I'm just like way better than everybody. And I was like, no, but like, why are you awesome? She's like, no, that's why.
Her sister's an Olympian.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's serious genetics at play there. It's just in the most unassuming package you could imagine.
Right.
You know, she's not tall. She's not jacked out of her mind. She doesn't have a bouncy stride. But internally, like, she's made out of pure platinum.
The answer is always the simple one. It's always the simple one. It's exactly what Rich just outlined with any of these standouts most of the time. It is that simple. Are you guys selling any snake oil to anybody with your training processes, Rich and Bracken? I sure as heck am not.
Speaking of, did you see your boy Liver King, Kirk? That was a blow to you.
I was shocked.
You could have discussed that if you came on the show, Kirk.
I really could have.
Wanted to get
he's
your
not natty,
reaction.
what am I even doing here?
Yeah,
seriously.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Just to go back on Lindsay real quick, Rich, you were hinting that she was like, "Oh, I just outlasted people." That's true to an extent, and I feel like that's half the reason why some people have success. Because a lot of college teammates, I'm sure it's the same with you in high school, like they just don't do it anymore. Mm-hmm. You're just the best remaining at this point, and you've been doing it. You worked out the kinks. You're not making rookie mistakes that some of the younger, faster people are at this point. But at a certain point, you're just good. Like, it's not that you just outlasted, and she's just good.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it comes down to.
She's talented.
If you let's say Sergey outlasted Atkins in that race. Atkins ran out of the word outlasting doesn't just imply consent. Like, I decided I was done. You outlasted me. Like, she outlasted Nicole through no fault of Nicole's own self. Her body just outlasted Nicole's body's ability to avoid the big one.
Mm-hmm.
She outlasted Susanna. Susanna had a baby. That's outlasting her. It's not that Susanna made a mistake that we know of by having the baby. By all, like, that's just what she was ready for that stage of her life. She just outlasted in many different forms. But you're also right, Jack. Because she looks unassuming, I don't think we should sleep on the fact that she's genetically dominant.
But any athlete with a crazy amount of talent is never going to be like, they're going to cross the finish line first and they're going to be like, oh, I'm just gifted. Like, it's just a gift. I won again. Like,
sucks to not be gifted.
And I'm just gifted. Everybody, I mean, even those athletes, their mindset isn't, oh, I'm gifted, so I'm going to win. It's the hard work and day in and day out,
Right.
which is you justify it. And whether it's purposeful work or it's not, or it's playing on your fat bike in the mountains, or it's running with your husband, like money is put in the bank, and it has been put in the bank for years and years and years. You build that on top of being gifted, and pretty soon there's just no fighting chance. And once in a while you come across athletes like that, and she's one of them.
Yeah, we've seen it in the men's field where we've always talked about how Atkins has faced every single person from every single era and just handled it. Like he had Hobie early on, and then Cody, Albin emerged. Killian came on the scene. Now we've got the younger guys with VJ and Ryan Kemp, and Rylan. He's been he's been there no matter who showed up. And with Lindsay, we kind of just overlook it because she's been dominant for so long, but she's had to deal with Zuzana and the Fab Five. She was just better than the rest of the Fab Five for the years when it was Nicole, Alyssa, Rhea, and Faye. And some of them have kind of disappeared off the scene, and Nicole is going to come back. But then we had Emma throw her name in the mix, Rebecca. Like, it doesn't matter. She's just always rising to the top, no matter who you throw it. It was the first time she's faced Esther on a fair, neutral, favorable course and in not frozen weather. And she takes her down by 2 minutes looking really easy, despite how dominating Esther's been. So it doesn't matter. So, like, at the end of the day, Lindsay's just the best, and she'll just deliver. We've seen it way too long to doubt.
That's true. Kirk, what you said is a really interesting point. And no one ever says, listen, I'm just talented. Because outside of a few people who are phenoms from a young age, everyone else wasn't the best until they were. And because of that, they will never be the talented one in their mind. And they feel every day of all the work they put in. And so they get to the top and they forget about how good they naturally are. And they only remember what they've done to bring out what they naturally are. But we all know if hard work is all it took, anyone could be a world champion. And we know some people who work really, really, really hard who just can't get fast. It's not in their makeup. So it's actually one of the things, and I'm not putting this on Lindsay because she doesn't do this, but you'll see this from time to time. Pro athletes will say, I'm not talented. I'm sick of this. I'm not talented. I'm no more talented than anyone else. I just am the hardest worker. I can't stand when athletes do that. Because you can be the hardest worker and also really talented, and they don't take away from each other. But it's insulting to hear that they think they're just a harder worker than everyone else, because we've all seen on Strava the people that outwork everyone. At some point, that's not enough. And people forget how talented they are because they're always surrounded by freaks of nature. Just because there's a bigger freak doesn't make you not a freak.
I did see a high school athlete in an interview say he wanted to thank his mom and dad for giving him the genetics he had, which I thought was amusing. And another fact,
that sounds like a Cade Flat thing.
I don't remember who it was. In another case, to your point,
Cruz Culpepper.
If you guys want to take a jog down memory lane, I've done this recently on my assault bike. Is I went back and I started watching all the Foot Locker cross country national championship races, the high school boys from so I went to my era, which was 2000, 2001.
They get that shit off of VHS somehow?
I don't know. It's on YouTube though.
Just put it on YouTube.
Dude, it's such good watching, and it's such a jog down memory lane. But the point being is, the last race I watched was Dathan Ritzenhein, Alan Webb, Ryan Hall was in it, and Dathan Ritzenhein schooled the field, and Webb came in second, and Ryan Hall wasn't even in the top three. He didn't get mentioned, wasn't even. Then he went on to become arguably one of our greatest United States marathoners to ever run. And none of these winners, it's so interesting. None of the winners, I can be like, what ended up happening to them? But it's I recognize the name in sixth place. That guy ended up representing us in the Olympics 3 times. It's really interesting, that point, Bracken, because going through the Foot Locker national champs on the men's and women's side has proven that to me just in the last week or two.
Yeah. And I don't care how hard you work in high school, you get to Foot Locker on talent. Because 4 years is the most you could have been working hard for in high school. It's not enough time to say I got here off hard work. You maybe got further because of hard work than other people, but you get to high school success predominantly off talent and unearthing it a little bit.
Yeah, it's what you consider hard work. As a high school kid, you probably don't quite know what that is or what that means.
Ritzenhein said he was running 90 to 95 mile weeks. So I was like, all right, maybe he's earned this.
Well, and that's true.
But it also might be part of his. I mean, he had a good career, but not a great
career. Yeah,
but you give anyone 4
Weber.
years at 95 miles and they don't hit their ceiling.
Yeah,
his floor is just higher. So if you're 6th at Foot Locker and you're like, look at how much more talented everyone around me is, that might be true, but
not true. Yeah,
you're the sixth most successful athlete in the United States of America. Like, you're in rarefied air, despite the fact that you're looking up at someone's shorts.
mm-hmm.
You know, it's perspective's everything, and people forget how talented you have to be for hard work to actually be effective.
Did you see Ryan Atkins? Matt B. Davis shared a story about an upcoming interview with him and Lindsay. And basically he was like, Ryan, Lindsay, what's it take to get there? And he's like, it's not that hard. All you have to do is a couple hard workouts, a couple really easy workouts, and then just fill the rest of the time with aerobic work the rest of the week. And you're going to reach 98% of your ceiling. And he's like, everybody can get to 98% for sure. And then
if you do it for like a decade.
Yeah. But then
that's what they said.
Then Eric Thoresen chimed in and he was like, that doesn't mean you'll be in the top 98% of performers though. And that talent is what's kind of overlooked. Like, you need the natural talent plus the work to really get there. But I thought it was interesting how Ryan kind of phrased it without including the talent piece as well, because he's obviously talented, as is Lindsay.
And he's right. And we talked about it again yesterday on the
I think Jack is somehow tapped into our back end recordings, because we had this exact same conversation yesterday. Yeah, it's already been recorded, Jack.
I've been studying.
Oh, I thought you were talking about what we talked about off air. I was like, that's not how I remember.
No.
Derek Rubis. Derek Rubis has been running 100-mile weeks for like, 8 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to that, he was doing 80 and 70 and 60. Derek Rubis will never break 5 in the mile. He might not. Has he broken? I don't know if he's broken 18 in the 5K.
None of this is true, Rubis. I believe in you.
I believe in him, but all of our ceilings are different. I believe Derek has hit his ceiling. And if he's not at it, he's at that 98% of the way there. He can work as hard as he wants, and he'll never beat Galen Rupp's times. Ever. And Galen would look around and be like, I'm the least talented person on the international scene. And so we just undervalue talent. And it's a depressing statement, because it means that we can't all reach our goals. But that's the fact. We can't all reach our goals. People get mad at me every time I say my time for winning a world title has sailed. Like, how dare you sell yourself short? Like, how dare I think I can beat Ryan Atkins? At some point, self-belief doesn't get you any farther.
Do you guys ever think of that, where if you're comparing yourself, and I know, Rich, it's different for you with DecaFit right now, but like, if you're looking at the OCR scene as a whole, it's like, we're still, another level or two behind the best of the sport. But if you just look at locally in Colorado or Wisconsin or Minnesota, it's like, how many people really can beat me? I'm not that bad, but you're comparing yourself against the top of the food chain. And of course you're going to make yourself not think you're as good as you are, when in reality, you actually are pretty talented.
Yeah,
I agree.
Nah, you got to do better. Knock off that bullshit.
All of us on this podcast would say we're not exceptionally talented individuals.
I would say I'm pretty talented.
I'm fairly talented as well.
And yet there's levels to everything. We all have people we've raced that would say, shut up, you're an idiot. Of course you're talented. And then we'd respond to them and be like, I lost by 14 minutes today. Don't tell me I'm talented. That person's it's all relative. But it's what pool are you in? What room are you in? You're supposed to be in a room where you're not the top dog. But by nature of that, you always think you're the underdog, and that you've been given a lesser hand than everyone around you.
It's fair. You want to feel like you've earned your place, and everybody has. Totally. The people that we're talking about, like Lindsay, is talented and has earned her place. You don't get one or the other. They're not mutually exclusive. It takes both. It's that simple.
Well, because for every Lindsay, there's a German Fernandez, who everyone knew was insanely talented and just couldn't make it work. They couldn't put in the work they wanted to. They couldn't stay healthy. They couldn't become what everyone saw they could be. And anyone who is talented feels slighted, because what do we think about talent is that it doesn't require hard work. That's not the case. If it didn't require hard work, German Fernandez would have every U.S. record right now. That's just not the way it works. You have
who
to have
was
both.
the guy who was I think he ended up doing tries or like
Lucas Verzbickas.
Yeah, did he stick around? Is he still doing stuff?
He retired.
No.
Retired. Jeez.
He got in a bad wreck.
He never made it back after that car crash.
Oh, car crash. Really?
Yeah.
That's no good.
Well, I thought he got hit by a car, was in the car.
Well,
right?
he was on a bike and the car hit him.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Like severed his windpipe, damaged his spinal cord, like really bad things.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
He didn't run for over a year. He was learning how to walk again, kind of stuff.
Well, let's move on from that. I'm sorry I brought it up. Jeez.
Whatever happened to that one guy?
Yeah,
ahead,
I was just gonna say we definitely addressed Lindsay in the women's field. I say we just throw out a couple more names who are worth mentioning because there was a good 2-3 battle right there between Esther and Elisa Petrova. I think it was very.
Annie was up like 6 minutes on the next 7 minutes.
Oh,
is that what it was between fourth and fifth?
Yeah.
Different planets.
So fourth place Annie was 5.4% slower than Lindsay. Fifth place Yank 12.3. So like 7% faster than that's ridiculous. There's just too much of a gap. I mean, obviously those top 4 women are super talented, and then you throw in some missing names like Nicole if she was healthy, Emma if she flew over, Ida if she decided to race again. But it's too big of a gap. It was bigger than on the men's side for sure. So it's kind of frustrating to see as a fan of the sport where we keep saying you want to see these new names. Where are they? Why won't they show up?
I'm so jaded. I just watched the whole time thinking, why don't we get to watch and find out how good Emma is next to Lindsay here?
We've watched her all year, and the same
not
thing
on sand.
happens. We did last year.
That's why I said I'm jaded. Like a 10K Emma on this.
You got to stop doing it. Stop.
I'm jaded. I always want to watch Emma challenge Lindsay. That's all I ever want in life.
We've seen it like 7 times. It always ends the same.
Hope springs eternal, Rich. Kirk, go for it.
You want that, and you want to fight Chris Roglaski. I think those are the two things.
But I just might be the hero the sport needs right now.
just gonna.
My take on the gaps, and I've run in sand in like Vegas. You know, we had maybe a mile worth of sand running. I did a trail race here, the Zumbro 17 miler. And we had a 1.5 miles straight of sand running in a riverbed. And it was the kind where you felt like you weren't going anywhere. So I've raced at a hard effort, not like this. I honestly think it has very little to do with how much you've practiced it. I think it has a lot to do with your intuition as to what the heck to do with your body and how to change on the fly with your mechanics. You can either make it work or you can't. What do? I lean forward like Sergei Paraligan did, right? He had this forward lean where like he's letting gravity do the work so he doesn't have to push off as much. He's just preventing him from landing on his face by putting his foot in front of the other. It has a lot to do with like, I think, intuitiveness out on there based on exact feedback from what your feet are telling you when they hit the earth. I think it has very little to do with how much time you spent doing it in practice. Granted, you can test ways to run in it. I think there's a lot of people that some are more intuitive with how to react in the moment and some are less. I looked at the sand running segment of my Zumbro race. I got my ass kicked there by like 6 minutes. I broke the course record and got smoked. But you want to know where I didn't on the segment? I was 30 seconds faster on that 1.5 miles of sand than the dude who smoked me. And I think it's mostly due to the fact that I was able to just pivot appropriately. I don't practice sand running, but maybe my stride style or my ability to just react was better than his. I still got beat. But I think I think that's a big case in sand running is that little thing. It's like, where's the athletic side of you come out and how do you react in the moment? Every step is different at a lot of times too, speaking of how there's different types of sand. And I think most people just aren't equipped with that arrow in their quiver, and thus the gaps do happen. Now, I'm not saying I went out there and blew it out. That's not what I'm saying, but I saw a very specific example with myself in a race against a guy who did smoke me overall, except in one bit, and he's clearly a better runner than I am. So
this is
whatever you make of that.
This is the 11th Spartan Race World Championship. This isn't like the beginning. This isn't OCR World's first year where no one had ever seen a rig and you didn't know what to do. By year 2, everyone figured it out. I think almost every single person who was planning on, or who ended up going to Abu Dhabi was planning on it pretty early in the year. They had the time to put in a little work on sand. Doesn't matter if you live near great sand dune, you can find a beach, even if it's a little more hard packed, like you were referencing what you're seeing on Lake Michigan, is that you can find a sandy place. You can run in the snow when it's nice and fluffy in the winter. You can mimic this a little bit to at least get used to what it'll feel like. And I feel like a lot of people just kind of overlook that element of it. They just kind of assumed, oh, I'm good at OCR, it's going to end the way that every other obstacle race ends, but it didn't.
I can think of like two people who was like Ian Hosick was traveling 3 hours to the sand dunes last year, wherever it was, and being very forthcoming about the fact, like, I'm ready. I went to the sand and I ran. I'm ready for the sand. VJ posted a few times about him going to the dunes and being ready to run, but I still think, and neither of them performed as well as they wanted to. Your case in point, people prepared themselves, so to speak. I think there's an X factor with it that we can't necessarily explain. That's what I think.
There is.
More than anything.
Fair enough.
I think two things with that. The first is that the people who have spent the most time in the sand are the best at it. I think it's a time thing. I don't think going there and hitting a workout or two does it for you, unless, like you said, you figure out the technique. The people who have figured out the technique and spent time training that technique to the point where it doesn't fatigue, like Elisa and Sergey, they're the ones who do super well at it. But the other piece is that I don't believe you can train sand like you can train technical terrain. You can get better at technical terrain by doing long runs, by doing tempo runs, by doing interval work, or by doing time trials. I believe that sand running, the best thing you can do is time trial or race. You can get away with the interval work, but it has to be hard interval work, because I believe sand rewards aggressiveness. I think when you lean into it and you attack it, it is rewarded in the sand.
That's so funny. I think the polar opposite.
I'm on Team Bracken with that. Be intentional every time you're there.
Yeah, I think that when you go out there, you have to, because the difference between running these big, long workouts and the race is that when you're running these workouts, you're running your best available pace and you're figuring out how to do it. The pace is put on you in a race, and everyone was found lacking. Even though they can all run faster than Sergey, not all, but they can all at least match him in the top 10. No one could there. They were put on, a pace was put on them that they couldn't handle with their stride type in that sand. And part of it is that X factor. You have to learn what your stride is on every type of sand to be able to do that. But the second is, it's so taxing to have that pace put on you that you have to have been there. And I think a lot of these people go out and say, I can only get to the sand once or twice. I'm going to get 3 to 4 hours in the sand. And I don't think that cuts it. I'd rather get 30 nasty minutes than 3 hours plotting. That's my personal take on it.
Does this come down to your episode with John Albin, where he was talking more about doing zone 3 work because that's your best available stride? Are you kind of hinting at, if you're going to spend the time getting to the sand and assuming it's back there next year, put in essentially a race effort, because that will be the stride that you're getting at? Don't bother doing like a 2-hour slog run, because that's not really going to pay off.
I think 2-hour slog run's fine, but the first 30 minutes have to be race intensity. And then you find out what you have left. And that X factor, I think, is figured out when you're trashed. When it's like running uphill. Everyone can do it, but not when they're tired. I don't think you get ready for Tahoe by doing all your speed work flat and then grinding uphill for 4 hours. You've got to run some, otherwise that first climb at intensity kicks you right in the junk. And I think sand has that. I know you don't think that sand rewards aggression, Kirk, but sometimes when you're hurting in sand, you have to get a more aggressive stride going. And maybe that just looks like a forward lean, but sometimes you got to churn in the sand. Otherwise, you're still hurting, but you're going slow.
I 100% agree with, when you're in the sand, you need to do it with the purpose and intensity of the race over extended duration, because that's the only way I think you're going to be able to cut it. My experience is just like, the harder you push, the less return on investment. And once you tip over in the sand, the amount of time and pacing you bleed out is astronomical. Mm-hmm. So it's like quicksand, right? The more you move, the more you sink. And I really believe that the more you push off, you're slowly getting a little less return on investment, the harder you work. And so you got to ride that line perfectly fine. Like perfectly fine. Yes. so aggression for me means like I'm going to run like a monster, attack every single stride where my foot hits the sand. I more think like you're feathering the gas right below that point in which your rev limiter hits the red. You got to stay there, because when you tip over, which almost everybody does trying to keep pace with the leaders, they implode like on no other terrain. That's why you see the gaps like you do in a mountain race, but it's flat, because it's the same explosion factor. And so that's the point I'm arguing.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
And again, I say these things over and over, but I raced 2 times in the same day the first time I was in Dubai.
Have you raced in Dubai before?
I may have, but the second race I ran more aggressively, because I knew I was tired in that sand no matter what happened. I worked harder to start out the second race, and I was significantly faster. I crumbled the same, but I crumbled the same. I was just minutes ahead at that point. So what I found is that going woe is me into the sand and going I'm racing into the sand, you crumble either way, but you can make it farther and then you're in the race. It's like when we saw Jacksonville, when the sloppy years, you saw people leaning back and breaking into the mud, and in Josiah and Kempson and some people leaning into the mud. They're expending more energy, but they were significantly faster. My take is that your return on your expenditure is much greater than you expect it to be. Not that you churn just outrageously, but you should work the sand rather than letting the sand work you, because either way it taxes you. Like mud pit running, some people can be fast through it and some can't. And I think it's how hard you lean into the mud. I think the sand's the same way.
Well, now that we're talking about sand so much, I want to pose a question to you guys. Sand seems to be a hot topic. I guess it makes sense considering the venue and all of it that they ran through. I had this theory footwear choice for this race. I mean, we talk about gaiters or not, you need to be wearing gaiters, but the thing proposed to me was a wider shoe is more of a platform, and thus you're going to get better push off, as in you may be better off running in a ultra road shoe than you would be running in a VJ IROC that's narrow with big lugs, because the lugs don't give you much of a return on investment. If this is true and there is some science, like having flippers in the water, you just move faster, right? The water moves as you kick your feet. Is this true with shoe choice? And could that have played as big of a factor? Like a bigger splay means more push off, means less give. Is this a theory you guys have heard? Did we pay attention to who was wearing what?
I think people want to search for things like this, but ultimately I think it's negligible. I think it's more of what we were just considering about like the form and grinding it out. And like, I don't think if you wore an ultra, if you had a bad race and you wore an ultra, it would change your race really that much.
I don't have experience. I don't have
snowshoes if that was the case.
I'm saying, as I was going to say.
Well, if you take anything to the extreme, it's not going to make sense anymore. But I
wearing
believe
shoes with 12-inch lugs, that wouldn't make sense. It's kind of
well, there is some
rebuttal
validity to it. Like the bigger your lug, the more you're knifing through the sand. And the wider, I mean, the more surface area you have, the more that you're going to be able to push against the sand. It still comes down to how you run. You run differently with 2 different shoes on, but my guess would having
this isn't even me this time.
Oh man.
Yes.
What just happened?
You just pulled up some of Jack's internet.
Yeah.
No. Am I back?
Oh, I was fine.
You're back. You're in the mix.
Amazing.
So I've tested shoes a bit.
Transformer
Some
box.
athletes I had tested it out a bit. My guess is that everyone has, if you took 3 shoes out there, you're going to have 1 shoe that you're actually noticeably faster in. But it's not going to be that you feel faster or that it's way easier. It's that if you ran mile time trials in 3 different shoes, you're going to have a 5 to 10 second per mile difference. I think it's like super shoes. It's not going to make you a better athlete, but you're going to either be faster with the same effort or same pace with a little bit less effort. It's the engagement of the little supporting things that don't have to clench as hard if you're slipping through the sand versus being on top of the sand. I think it's minuscule, but I think it adds up. And I think it adds up more the longer the race is. So like last year, I think it mattered more than this year.
Yeah. And you were out longer in the heat. But I think that the tough thing with this, every single person had gaiters on. So it was really hard to ID shoes. And you didn't do well if you didn't have gaiters on. So I feel like you'd have to kind of ask the athletes what they wore to really be able to answer the question successfully.
Well, Atkins was in his extreme. I mean, not the extreme, the ultras, it looked like, just like last year. He went with lesser lugs and wider platform. So that's a sample size of 1.
There we go.
First and second. I mean,
I would have been in a road super shoe, the widest road super shoe I could find that had stability.
Really?
Yep, absolutely. And if not a road super shoe, I would have been in a wide, lightweight, barely lugged trail shoe. I would have gone wider. There's no downside to it, as long as it's a light shoe.
Do you want to know one other question about the sand and stride that we didn't talk about? Last year, it was on a Friday. First race, basically, like they were the ones setting the course. They had the beast. All the age groups had out before them. So every single person had foot tracks that they could go in that were already broken in, unless you were that first age grouper going through. So there were thousands of footsteps already made for all the elite runners. I'm surprised that the gaps were so big when people could kind of step in steps that were already there.
That's the part I don't understand yet. Big gaps happened by 5K. That's the part I don't understand. I understand the big gaps from 5K to finish. That makes a lot of sense to me. But there is some information we don't have yet as to why there were 70 seconds to VJ by 5K.
I think the more hard pack stuff was on the back half, wasn't it? So they got a lot of that looser running early.
Like mile 4 or something. Yeah.
The gaps occurred earlier than I expected them to.
Another note I had about the race is where was everybody watching? Atkins crossed the finish line. There were like 6 people there.
No,
not really.
More than that.
It didn't look like it to me.
If you look at the spear throw, there were like dozens of people sprinting over there. And then you can see the perspective from like A-frame, I guess the long rig, whatever they had before there. And it was lined.
Think of what term you just used. Dozens.
I was going to say. It sounds pretty impressive.
Dozens at the Ohio Beast when I ran it.
I'm aware. But
just an observation.
No one's traveling from Wisconsin to watch this. It's only going to be people who are there with a vested interest in an athlete.
Yeah.
So what shoes would you have all worn?
I would have to test. I would have had to actually get in there and test, like you mentioned. I'd actually have to get in there, and I would have done it right when I went a week out. I probably would have done it and put some harder efforts in a few pairs.
Absolutely.
But with what I got in the repertoire now, I don't know. It's interesting. Probably the Hoka or something. The Hoka's a little bit wider.
I might have done the RC Elite ones.
The Zanal would have been a great shoe.
Zanal. So Jared Price had it down to the Zanal and I think the Mafate Speed.
I've got a couple pairs of ultra trail shoes that I don't really wear much anymore, but just the wider toe box I feel like would pay off.
I don't believe that.
Would this be a place for the old 5 fingers, Bracken? The one time in which they shine? Could you imagine?
I'm pretty sure Kimberly Isom
might be worth the experiment.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Jack,
lay the toes out like a fin.
Now we're talking.
Yeah, if you webbed them.
Ooh, webbed them.
Jack, the bottom of the Ultra, I think would be very nice. Like their Vanish, Elite or Pro or whatever, their super shoe. But the extra toe splay, I think, is actually bad because everything is like here or here. And I think you would just shift. Like your foot would plant, your foot would shift until you found the outside of your foot, and then you'd push off.
Oh, maybe.
Does that make sense?
I'm sure Chris probably wore Ultras.
Yeah.
She's generally
she always does. Yep.
Nothing that she does counts. But we felt it on the side of hills when you run in a shoe. If you're not squeezed by the shoe, it's hard to push off on the side of the shoe.
I will say when I was at Great Sanders with VJ, I wore the Innovate Terra Ultra G270s. Those are great. I love them. But I noticed the hardest thing to keep your speed up, if you weren't perfectly on the ridge line, if you ever were like a foot or two off the edge, now you're facing the angle. Like that was the biggest difference. So I feel like people may have picked a bad line, and that could have affected things a little bit on certain things of these. Like most of the time we're trained to run the tangents and take the shortest distance between things. But I noticed personally that when I took the slightly longer path but stayed right on the ridge line going over and across these dunes, that was always faster and less effort.
And the second person, if you run off camber, they get a flat footprint to step into, and it's a huge advantage.
Yeah.
So we would all lean towards a slightly wider shoe.
I think so.
Probably.
Although I think you bring 3 over in your test.
Oh yeah.
You guys weren't listening, but they alluded towards somebody running barefoot.
Favorite bogey. Was he out there?
Does that guy have the most shout outs on this podcast for like a guy we don't know who it is?
Maybe.
Yeah. Or how'd your guy do who we were going nuts about last year, who got stuck at slip wall?
Oh, Mervin. He got like 25th.
Magic Mervin.
He might have got stuck there again.
He might still be there.
Yeah.
Well, I did want to talk about the all-time list, but we don't have enough time for that. I know you guys don't like doing that anyway, but we're going to do it maybe next week where we're going to go through. We're going to go through. We're going to add some names. We're going to get out, maybe blow it out to like 15 to 20 people on the list. And we're going to make some decisions on that.
This complicates things.
It does.
Yeah. This Sergey is going to have a lot of chips on his shoulder after this conversation.
I'm looking at it. He's going to have to jump a bunch of people.
This is the problem.
Let's look at
weird venues.
No. We're either going into it or not going into it, Rich. We can't preview this.
Oh man, but
we can do whatever we want.
We're already 145 deep.
I would rather talk about the coverage. I'd rather
Sorry.
talk about the coverage itself that we were a part of and stuff. If we've got 15 minutes to kill, than an abbreviated, all-time ranking list.
Totally.
I'd rather dive into that.
I have another thing that the coverage. You want to talk about that more?
Or the second edition of the Race Brain.
He wants to talk about himself.
Along.
You guys want to talk about our fantasy scoring this last week?
So the punishment piece.
You didn't get punished last year. I'm not getting punished. Yeah.
Hold your horse.
Just settle your soil, Jack.
Jack's internet speed is a top notch when he's fucking trying to get out. He's
hitting his turbo button.
Weasel his way out of a punishment.
Yeah,
so
increase speed.
We're gonna do an eating challenge. I was planning on doing it in Vegas last year because we were all planning on being there. But that's out of the mix. But I was Googling some eating challenges here in Colorado, since Jack and I are both here, and there's actually a team challenge. There's a 20-inch across, 3-inch deep bracket.
Please say steak.
No, that'd be crazy. 14-pound pizza that's like stuffed with cheese, hamburger, sausage, and pepperoni. 2 people get to take it on.
I feel like Jack's probably lactose intolerant.
I was gonna say Jack's gonna have some issue with cheese.
I've eaten 18 slices of pizza at once back in the day. I don't think that
can
handle that right now. I do
the
eat
reward.
What was that?
Jack, just for a second.
This isn't about a reward.
The purpose of the eating punishment is not to say I could handle this right now.
Yeah.
These aren't eating challenges. If you're like, yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good.
14. Do you know how much weight 7 pounds of thick pizza? Like that's we're not finishing this, Rich.
Point.
I know that.
It's gonna expand once you swallow that shit too.
Knock it off.
Oh, yeah.
We'll do a big long High Rocks workout before, and then we'll do like 2 hours of High Rock stuff. We'll go straight to this place called Bejo's. It's Colorado style pizza, which I don't fucking know what that means. I'm probably saying it.
What's the reward?
Yeah, what is the
it's like $100
checks in the mail, just like mine last year.
$100, and you get a picture on a wall. I think it was a couple things: picture on a wall, T-shirt, and $100. Usually, it's just like we won't charge you $80 for this pizza, which is a terrible reward. But this actually gives you some stuff, dude. We can do it.
Do they pay for your hospital bill afterwards?
Listen, I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna ask for more. I'm gonna get.
I did the Big Texan Steak Challenge maybe like 5, 6 years ago. Which is a 72-ounce steak and 5 sides. I made it through all 72 ounces of the steak in 25 minutes or so and hit the wall. I was talking with people because you're on this big stage at the Big Texan Steakhouse, and
it's like Amarillo or whatever.
Yeah, in Amarillo, and they have
how big of a stage are we talking? Is this like a dais?
No, this is in a big restaurant where you're on a raised single
Chuck E. Cheese type stage. What?
Go look at it. They have a live
bigger
web
than
stream.
Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah. All right, Brian.
So you're on display while you're
you're on display, and people can come up
yourself?
to you and just talk to you, tell you how stupid you are for trying this and stuff. And
They're right.
Yeah, Audrey was like, "Stop talking to people. Just eat this. Just get it done."
What's the time? Is there a time frame?
60 minutes, and they have this big CrossFit workout clock in the background, essentially, where it's counting down. Everybody can see it. And if I just literally wasn't talking with people, taking pictures with people who thought I was stupid eating this much, I probably would have finished the whole thing in like 18 to 20 minutes. And it reached 25 minutes, and I had like a couple of sides left. I ate half a potato in the next 25 minutes. It was so brutal once your stomach just locks up on you. And I ended up being 2 bites away from finishing it. I was probably one of the closest to not get it done. And then I got hit with a $100 bill on my birthday, which wasn't worth it. But
And then
It's tough to handle
the
the
next
fame.
3 days.
oh my God. Yeah. Like the next 5 days. It was
That's
horrible.
what I'm talking about. I know what it's like to mildly overeat every night at dinner, because I do it every night at dinner to the point where I'm mildly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then to do it and like triple or quadruple that, like I just don't see where
I couldn't eat a 72.
So it does sound like a punishment now that I'm thinking this through more.
72
Jaw
ounces.
tired?
Yes.
Yeah, your jaw probably got tired. 72 ounces is about 4.5 pounds of steak, right? So we're doing like 6.5 pounds with cheese and some bread. Bread's going to be a little bit easier to go down. Steak takes a long time to digest, stuff like that. Cheese will take a little bit of time for sure. I can't say that it won't. But there's a little bit more carbohydrates involved in this. We can do this, Jack. Come on.
I'd
not
wash that
backing
down
out.
with some X.
I'm not backing out. I'm just saying it's going to be obviously
A
a worthy
suppository.
punishment.
A suppository.
We need to be like sponsored by Charmin or something for this challenge, because it's going to end up very
No,
poorly.
you're not going to want to wipe. You're going to want to squeeze bottle that, because there's going to be a lot of
Squeeze
occurrences
bottle.
coming. Yeah.
Sponsored by
I can get
Bidet.
you some Quilted Northern for free if you need it.
You
All
got that
right.
hookup?
You look
Got
like
that?
the guy right now. So
Do I?
You have
That's
a
brawny
Quilted
man.
Northern hookup?
a brawny man, yeah.
My mother's
Your
boyfriend
mom.
of forever. He
Yeah.
works at a paper mill. Yeah.
That's right.
Oh,
I
yeah.
forgot you have
They
a
always
toilet
come
paper
over
closet.
with tubs of toilet paper. I have a toilet paper closet, paper towel, napkins. I got a surplus here. When COVID hit, I was just sitting up. On my
You were
feet.
that
You
guy.
could have been
Oh, yeah.
so loaded. People were
Could've just
trading
started
like
selling it.
houses for toilet paper back then.
And I was using like way more than I needed. Like, just using 12 squares of wipe just because I
Just-
could.
Yeah, swimming in it.
Yeah.
I was sent to load up on that, and I grabbed a case of toilet paper and a case of paper towel. And I got home and I gotten 2 cases of paper towels.
Oh, no.
And we went back and there's no toilet paper.
Dude, you had your chance. You
Now
blew
go get
it.
yourself some problems. Wipe with paper towel for a month.
That doesn't sound great.
I just switched to
Terrible.
wipes full on.
It's a good
Yeah.
grab per wipe ratio, though, with that, texture.
Can't flush it, though. I don't think.
No, you got to rip that
No.
thing in half if you're gonna flush.
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. You haven't pissed off your neighbors till you've done your poop towel burn pile.
You actually do
Nice,
that? It'll
Have to
burn
go
'em.
somewhere.
That's rough.
These episodes always tank about this time. It's my favorite part of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
My favorite.
We got some feedback that people like the going off the rails. They would have loved the intro, but that
Mhm.
part's not getting mentioned.
Yeah. No.
The pre-intro.
I don't know where that would live.
Gotta keep my reputation where
We
it's at.
chatted for about 15 minutes before we hit the record button, and it got weird, guys.
It was good. It was
Very weird.
high quality. High
We're
quality
thinking of
conversation.
creating a platinum Patreon member for that kind of thing. It's gonna be about $100 a month, though.
No, it's gotta be
for the
more than
stuff
that.
We
yeah.
talked about.
At that point. Yeah. All right. So what's on tap next time? The Okras? Is that
Do we
what
want to do
we're-
Okras next time, or we could do this? We'll have a little bit of High Rock stuff. We need to talk about High Rocks this season because there's at least one really
Yeah.
good person to.
Is LA this weekend?
LA's this weekend.
Okay. Let's do
And then-
Okras in 2 weeks. We'll talk
Yeah.
about High Rocks and then
We'll talk about
those.
High
Because I
Rocks
want
and-
to put on a production. I want to get some people
Yeah.
calling in. I want
Okay.
this to be legit.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll get
2
some
weeks.
people ready. And then
Talk about High Rock. Somebody here has got more pressure on him than he ever has. I feel like following up a world champ. I think people are waiting to see what the Rich Ryan show brings. So you better have some good stuff for us.
easy peasy.
You cannot win a world championship at DECA and then come and get spanked by Dylan Scott. You can't.
Mm-mm-mm.
This
That's
can't
true.
happen. You can't come out and have Rylan give it to you on his first. It negates it cheapens all of DECA.
Listen
The
to
whole
him.
DECA world is cheapened if you get spanked by these people.
Do it for the people.
Do it for the DECA community. I think you're right.
Yeah.
Is
The,
Ryan for sure showing up?
I don't know, because VJ said he was going to do it too. I like trying. I've never done
VJ's
what they're
not
doing.
Anymore.
No, I wouldn't imagine. If I was Ryland too, it's like, dude, at this point,
Relax.
but you have to do it to qualify for North American Championships in Chicago.
Oh, is it the last chance?
It's the last chance. That's why Kent and I are both going, like, we don't necessarily want to do this. So
Yeah.
in terms of pressure, we just need to get the time. The real thing is later. So we're just going to have some nice time pushing a sled, do a little rowing.
Do you want to know what
that's going to lead to?
Really
PR.
fast time.
Probably crush. Yeah. No, I feel good. I don't feel pressure. I just feel like, all right, yeah, I just got to have this fitness. Maybe we'll do some wall balls leading up to it and hope they don't crush me. Yeah. That's the main thing.
I just thought of someone who I don't think should be able to instantly hop in and, challenge Lindsay, but like with her compromised running ability, I would love to see Meg Jacoby hop in there. We saw Viola Oberlander. She finished like 12th or 13th in Abu Dhabi. She ended up racing. And obviously a lot of OCR athletes have good compromised running ability as the IROX athletes. So
Viola wasn't on the list. Would have drafted her.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because Meg is faster than Lindsay.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. She doesn't like obstacles. That's not her jam.
Has she done one?
I mean, yeah, she's part of like the Noob Sanity crew.
No, I mean, has she done a race that we can look at?
I'm not sure, but like she fails obstacles.
Oh, she fails them?
I think so. I think she
can't say. Well, yeah, she's part of Noob Sanity.
In 3 weeks.
She does. She knows she's been on obstacles.
Noob Sanity.
Listen,
how do you know she fails them if she hasn't raced?
I don't know.
Could she get through Spartan Race?
Probably.
That'd be interesting. What course would you want to see her against Lindsay on?
Dry Abu Dhabi.
Like in High Rock, Chicago.
Castaic Lake.
Don't give Lindsay the chance to get good at that because we'd have another conversation probably in about a year.
No way. No chance.
Becca, sure.
Chris Roglaski was the High Rocks World Championship, and I would argue that give Lindsay 3 months and she could go at least rival Chris, right?
Chris is a fraud.
You better be careful because we're setting up to chat with her later this week, Bracken.
Good. It's settle this whole thing.
We're gonna.
But we've seen Lindsay really.
We're gonna have a rap.
When are you gonna officially? When are you officially gonna fight Chris Bracken? Like that's gotta happen before the end of the year.
Thursday at about 12:30 p.m. Central Time, I think. Just waiting for a confirmation, Bracken.
On the fight,
I will fight Chris when you beat that food challenge.
Dude, we're gonna do that challenge.
Rich, I'm going all in on this thing. I want to see this. I want to see Bracken get knocked out.
Gonna be eating lettuce to expand the stomach. I think that's what they do. Chugging waters.
You want to have Joey Chestnut on your podcast? Ask for some tips, and then we'll be ready.
That champion mindset.
Jack, I've never lost consciousness in my life. Chris Roglaski's not going to be the one to separate me from consciousness.
We were driving back from Great Sand Dunes, and I brought up that topic because she was in the car with us. And we didn't have reception. And I was like, you know what? We should just call up Bracken right now and just talk smack to him right now. And she's like, I would destroy him. He doesn't know what's coming. Like she's ready. She wants to do it.
Listen, we're set to record with her later this week. I will play moderator. As soon as we look her in the eyes and the screen turns on, we're going right into it. And I will make sure this is navigated appropriately. Okay. Right. As much as virtually can.
They have weight classes for a reason. I've got like at least 50 pounds on her.
Probably.
Doesn't matter.
Maybe more.
Chris will run all the way to Wisconsin and still get you.
She has.
I could hold my hand out like this on her forehead and she couldn't kick or hit me.
Right? Bracken's going to come like with real strategies. Like, listen, I will punch you in the face.
There's not going to be a fight. I'm just gonna roll Tide right over the top. My big takeaway from meeting her in person for the first time is she looks way taller on camera than she really is. She runs tall and strong. She's taller than a lot of the women, but I thought she was gonna be like 5'10", 5'11". She wasn't that
compact power.
She had a growth spurt. She's doing it just to beat you.
So did Bracken. You hear that little hint there?
That is actually accurate. Growth spurt exists.
Belly.
All right, gentlemen. We did a half decent job today. Next week we're going to be talking. We'll do High Rocks, and we're looking at this list, and we're putting more names, and we're moving some stuff around on the all-time list, and then we'll do Ochres in 2 weeks.
Unless we want to do okras on New Year's Eve or like the day before New Year's Eve and make it a real black tie event.
I'm a little worried because I'm going to be at my parents' house in New Hampshire, and if I'm already having bad internet problems here, it's not going to work there. So I think
Some of us have lives.
Same soil over there. How could it be worse?
No, we recorded that thing with Dave. It was a nightmare. So
it's about
2 weeks okras.
2 weeks. 2 weeks okras. Look nice. All right, fellas. And
You're going to have to change shirts, Rich.
I know.
Can I wear a hat? Or is that not considered nice?
Yeah.
I mean, you could.
Like a Stetson?
So classy event. Got it.
Stetson and a bolo tie?
I have both.
Running public, what do you guys got this week?
Chris Rogowski.
We haven't interviewed her yet. So
maybe. That might fall through.
Bless her heart and her travel schedule. I think she said she can make it work. So what the heck did we talk about? Oh, no wrong way to strength train. We dive into that on our training Tuesday.
For running.
Correct.
Doing stuff, doing some things.
Just doing stuff and things.
Why runners need to strength train, what you're actually trying to accomplish.
But why you don't need to stress the F out about every little detail with it.
Yeah, and why you can make almost any strength program work, because you're probably not trying to accomplish what people are telling you you're trying to accomplish.
For runners, for sure. Yeah, just do some stuff.
Exactly.
Here it is. You don't have to tune in.
Honestly, yeah, skip our episode, I guess.
Do some stuff.
I had Tim Silvestri on Reinforced Running Podcast. He's been on a couple times talking about mental performance stuff. So he's back again, dropping.
He's a good listen.
Yeah, he knows. He really knows his stuff. So
you hear that? Fun. Kirk listens to yours.
This is from an old episode.
He has once listened. I was thinking about maybe I'll listen to the Ian Floyd episode. I don't know. I'm thinking about it.
How many episodes would you say you've listened to of ours? Because I think I've listened to 4 or 5 of yours.
I would say a half a dozen. Yeah, 6, 7.
How do you decide when? Like, okay, I'll listen to that one.
Now it's easy because it's always never. But
our first one, probably you were curious.
I don't know if I listened to the first one.
That might have been. Yeah.
No, I don't think I did that. I listened to one time I was having Megita on and I was preparing. Like just getting some stuff on Megita, and I listened to your podcast. And that's when I realized that was actually a bad idea. So I was like, all right, I'm just taking information he's already talking about and trying to get questions around the stuff he's already said. So I stopped doing that. I listened to at least one of the hunters because I thought he was going to put some details out about OCR stars, and I think he did. Maybe 2
in
of
the last
hunters.
10 minutes.
Yeah. And then I listened to Annie when she was kicking butt. She's still kicking butt.
I'm like, man, I should have drafted this girl.
I had the opportunity. I mean, it would have served me much better than freaking Richard Hynek, Jack.
I've never lied on who's showing up.
Taking me down with you so we could do this pizza challenge.
Yep.
And that might be it.
I've got one more question. So Kirk and Bracken, you guys just won the season. Kirk, you weren't part of the show last year when we did the draft. Should we do 4 separate teams next year, or do you guys want to keep it going with the 2 of you?
We'll probably have to change the scoring format, won't we? The number of people.
Well, we could do like, draft 6, top 5 score or something like. I don't know, but
I like being a package deal, to be honest. But
I'm fine with it. I was just curious what you guys thought. If you think you had too much of an advantage or not.
I don't know why you'd try. I mean, I get it. I would too if I were in a losing position, but I don't know why we would try to drive something between us. We got a good thing going.
It's true.
I'm not worried about. I want them to come back because I think they're generally terrible at this, and they got lucky.
Generally, as in we're 1 for 1 on winning the league together
by 1 round. Lucky.
Doesn't matter if you win by an inch or a mile. Winning is winning.
Or 5/8 of an inch or a
freaking
mile.
50-year-old guy gets 3rd place in Spartan World Championships, and all of a sudden, you guys win the league.
No.
Yep.
Fine. All right.
We were in position to take advantage of our savvy. You got to be in position when the kicking starts.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's true. We were all there.
All right. We'll get him next year.
All right.
And we know Jack can't kick.
Now we know.
All
right. That's it, fellas. See ya.